The dress arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always quiet at Sullivan Enterprises. Declan spent the morning reviewing shipment manifests, the legitimate ones, printed on cream cardstock with the company logo embossed in gold. By afternoon, he'd moved on to the other ledgers, the ones kept in the safe behind the Rothko painting, their pages filled with numbers that told a different story entirely. I'd worked for Declan Sullivan for 6 years, long enough to know which files required my signature and which required my silence. Long enough to recognize the difference between a business associate and a liability about to be resolved. Long enough to understand that the man behind the mahogany desk, with his salt and pepper hair and eyes the color of winter storms, was both the most dangerous and the most honorable person I'd ever known. The courier arrived at 2:15, disrupting the cathedral quiet of the executive floor. I signed for the package, a large white box tied with ivory ribbon, and felt my stomach twist with something between anticipation and dread. My wedding dress. "Personal delivery, Miss Quinn?" Declan's voice carried from his office, that slight Irish lilt more pronounced on certain words. He appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading glasses perched on his nose. The glasses always surprised people. They made him look almost professorial, disguising the man who controlled half of Chicago's underground economy. "Yes, Mr. Sullivan." I kept my voice professionally neutral, the same tone I'd perfected over 6 years of denying what simmered beneath every interaction. Every late night working side by side, every moment his hand brushed mine passing documents. "My wedding dress. I apologize for having it delivered here, but my apartment building's package room isn't secure, and this was... well, it's important." Something flickered across his face, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Of course, significant purchase. When's the blessed event again?" 2 weeks, Saturday the 20th. The date sat like a stone in my mouth. 14 days until I became Mrs. Marcus Brennan, fulfilling the agreement my father had made to erase the gambling debts that had nearly destroyed our family. Declan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Brennan's a lucky man." The words were correct, appropriate even, but they landed with the weight of everything left unsaid in 6 years of careful distance, of professional boundaries maintained with military precision, of glances that lasted a heartbeat too long before one of us looked away. "I should get back to the Henderson contracts," I said, lifting the box. "I'll just put this in the storage closet until I leave tonight." "Elena." My name stopped me mid-turn. He rarely used it, preferring the formal Miss Quinn that kept the walls between us intact. "You could try it on if you'd like. The executive washroom has a full mirror. No one's on this floor except us and Lachlan, and he's downstairs with the security team." I turned back slowly, searching his face for ulterior motive and finding only a kind of tired resignation. "That's not necessary, Mr. Sullivan. Humor me." He returned to his office, settling behind his desk with the careful movements of a man carrying old injuries. "You've been staring at that box like it might bite you since it arrived. Try it on. See if it fits. Better to know now than the morning of." He was right, pragmatically speaking. The seamstress had taken my measurements 3 weeks ago, working from photos I'd shown her since I couldn't afford an appointment at a proper bridal salon. She'd promised the dress would be perfect, but I hadn't actually tried it on. "If you're certain it won't be an imposition, Elena." He looked up, those winter storm eyes finding mine. "Try on your wedding dress. That's not a request from your employer. That's a suggestion from someone who's known you long enough to see you've been anxious about this." My throat tightened. In 6 years, he'd never acknowledged the personal, never crossed that invisible line we'd both drawn. But he'd noticed my anxiety. Of course he had. Declan noticed everything. I carried the box to the executive washroom, a space larger than my apartment's bedroom, all marble and polished chrome. With shaking fingers, I untied the ivory ribbon and lifted the lid. The dress was more beautiful than I dared hope. Vintage-inspired lace over champagne silk, with a fitted bodice and full skirt that whispered promises of fairy tales and happy endings. The seamstress had outdone herself, creating something that looked like it cost 10 times what I'd actually paid. I undressed carefully, hanging my gray wool dress, professional, modest, chosen to disappear into the background of Declan's world, on the hook behind the door. The wedding dress slipped over my head like a benediction, the fabric cool against my skin. I fumbled with the concealed zipper, finally managing to close it, and turned to face the mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Not Elena Quinn, executive secretary, keeper of secrets, daughter of a man whose weakness for cards had sold her future. This woman looked like a bride, like someone who might actually believe in happiness. I smoothed the lace over my hips, watching light catch in the delicate pattern. It fit perfectly. The seamstress had worked magic with just photographs and measurements, creating something that looked custom-made for my body. I should have felt joy, relief, something other than the hollow ache that had taken up residence in my chest since my father had sat me down 6 months ago and explained, with tears in his eyes, that Marcus Brennan had made him an offer. Take care of the debts. All of them, including the interest compounding faster than my father could repay, in exchange for one thing: me. Marcus was fine. Handsome enough, from one of Chicago's old Irish families, with money from legitimate businesses and no apparent connection to the world Declan inhabited. My mother had been thrilled. My father, relieved. And I had agreed because what choice did I have? Watch my family lose everything? See my father broken by the bookmakers who tolerated his debt only because they knew Declan Sullivan's secretary might prove useful leverage someday? I'd chosen this. Chosen duty over desire, practicality over the impossible. Chosen to marry a man I barely knew, rather than confess feelings for a man who'd never indicated he felt anything beyond professional regard. A knock on the bathroom door startled me. Elena? You've been in there 20 minutes. Everything all right? 20 minutes? I glanced at my watch, startled to discover he was right. I'd been standing here, staring at my reflection, for far longer than I'd realized. I'm fine, I called back. Just, the dress is more complicated than I expected. May I see? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us had ever dared voice. In 6 years, Declan had never asked for anything personal from me, never stepped over the line that kept our relationship safely professional. I don't think that's appropriate, Mr. Sullivan. Probably not, he agreed, his voice carrying a note I'd never heard before. But I'd like to see it anyway, if you're comfortable with that. I stared at my reflection, at the lace and silk that transformed me into someone who belonged in a different life. Then, before I could reconsider, before common sense could override the need to know, to finally know if what I felt was echoed even slightly in him, I opened the door. Declan stood in the hallway, one hand braced against the doorframe, looking like he'd been prepared to wait as long as necessary. His reading glasses were gone, tucked into his pocket, and the expression on his face when he saw me made my breath catch. For a long moment, he didn't speak, didn't move, just looked at me with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time, like every carefully maintained wall between us had suddenly become transparent. Does it look good? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended, hating how much the answer mattered, how desperately I needed to know what he thought. I know it's not from a fancy salon or anything, but the seamstress said, "Don't marry him." The words fell between us like stones into still water, sending ripples through every assumption I'd built over 6 years of working side by side. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard, that anxiety had warped his actual words into what I wanted to hear. "I'm sorry?" Declan's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. His hands clenched at his sides, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for me. Don't marry Marcus Brennan. Don't marry anyone you don't love. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mr. Sullivan, I don't think... It's a mistake, he continued, his voice rough. A goddamn waste, you're... He broke off, turning away, one hand dragging through his hair. Forget I said anything. Inappropriate. I apologize. He started back toward his office, and panic overrode every instinct toward self-preservation. Why? Why would you say that? He stopped, his back still to me, shoulders rigid with tension. Because I've spent 6 years watching you. 6 years working with the most competent, brilliant woman I've ever known. 6 years resisting the urge to... Again, he cut himself off. You deserve better than an arranged marriage. Better than trading yourself to settle someone else's debts. And how do you know that's what this is? My voice came out sharper than intended, defensive, because he was right. He'd somehow seen through the careful story I'd constructed, the pretense that Marcus and I had fallen naturally into engagement. I know everything that happens in this city, Elena, including when Patrick Quinn accumulated debt with bookmakers who operate in my territory. Including when Marcus Brennan paid off those debts in exchange for... He turned back to me, and the rawness in his expression stole my breath. In exchange for you. Shame burned through me. He knew. Of course he knew. Declan Sullivan's network of information was legendary. Nothing happened in Chicago's underground without him hearing about it. Then you understand why I have to do this, I said quietly. My father... Your father made his own choices. His debts aren't your responsibility. He's my father. Family means a hell of a lot, Declan interrupted. But it doesn't mean sacrificing your entire future. There are other ways to handle the situation. I laughed, a sound edged with bitterness. Are there? Because from where I'm standing, this was the only option that didn't end with my father broken or dead. Marcus's offer solved everything. My father's debt disappeared. My mother can sleep at night, and My voice cracked. I get to be practical, responsible. I marry a decent man who can provide for me, and everyone wins. Except you. The 2 words landed like a blow. I looked down at the dress, at the lace and silk that suddenly felt more like a costume than a promise. I'm fine with the arrangement. Marcus is kind. He'll be a good husband. You don't love him. It wasn't a question. I met Declan's gaze, seeing something I'd never allowed myself to acknowledge before. A hunger that matched my own. Carefully controlled but undeniably present. Love isn't a requirement for a successful marriage, I said, the words tasting like ash. Respect, compatibility, shared goals, those matter more. Bullshit. The profanity shocked me. In 6 years, I'd heard Declan curse perhaps twice, both times under extreme provocation. You're lying to yourself. You deserve someone who looks at you the way... He cut himself off again, jaw working. You deserve to be loved, Elena. Desperately. Completely. Not married as a business transaction. My hands twisted in the lace skirt. And where exactly am I supposed to find that? I'm 31, Mr. Sullivan. I work 60 hours a week for a man who... I stopped myself, suddenly aware of how close I was to confession. I'm not a naive girl anymore. I know what's realistic. Realistic. He said the word like it offended him. You're going to marry a man you don't love because it's realistic. You're going to spend the next 50 years being practical, while a part of you withers because it never got what it actually needed. What I need is to take care of my family. What I need is security. Marcus can provide both. I could provide both. The declaration hung between us, crackling with implications. I stared at him, blood pounding in my ears. What? Declan's expression shifted, like he'd surprised himself as much as me. I could pay off your father's debts. No strings, no arrangement, just gone. Problem solved. Why would you do that? His laugh was harsh. Because I've spent 6 years keeping you at arm's length. 6 years maintaining professional boundaries while watching you walk through my office every morning. 6 years resisting what I wanted because you worked for me, and I have rules about that sort of thing. And now you're standing there in a wedding dress, about to marry someone else, and He dragged a hand over his face. I'm asking you to reconsider. That's all. Just think about whether this is really what you want. My throat was so tight I could barely speak. You're offering to pay my father's debts so I won't marry Marcus. Yes. But not offering anything in return, not proposing some other arrangement, not suggesting. No, he interrupted firmly. I'm offering freedom. What you do with it is entirely your choice. But Elena, Christ, don't marry a man you don't love because you think there's no alternative. I looked down at the dress again, vision blurring with tears I refused to shed. 6 years. 6 years of working beside him, of late nights when coffee and conversation blurred into something that felt like companionship, maybe even friendship. 6 years of convincing myself that the way my heart raced when he walked into a room was just nerves, that the ache when he left for the day was merely the end of a work routine. 6 years of lying to myself. I need to change, I said, my voice barely audible. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have. Elena, please. I looked up at him, pleading. I need to get back to work. The Henderson contracts are due tomorrow, and I haven't finished the revisions. Something in my face must have convinced him to let it go. He stepped back, giving me space to retreat to the bathroom. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Declan Sullivan had told me not to marry Marcus Brennan, had offered to pay off my father's debts, had admitted, in barely veiled terms, that 6 years of professional distance had been a choice, not indifference. With shaking hands, I removed the dress, folding it carefully back into its box. My gray wool dress felt like armor as I pulled it on, something to hide behind, to restore the Elena Quinn who'd walked into this bathroom 30 minutes ago. When I emerged, Declan was back at his desk, focused on paperwork, as if nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway of his office, the white box clutched against my chest. Mr. Sullivan. He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. Miss Quinn. The formality was a retreat, a return to safe ground, but I couldn't leave it there. Couldn't pretend the last hour hadn't altered something fundamental between us. Why now? I asked quietly. Why say something after 6 years of silence? His pen stilled on the contract he'd been reviewing. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, without looking at me, he said, Because I've spent 6 years telling myself there would be time. That eventually you'd find someone worthy of you, and I'd be genuinely happy for you. But Marcus Brennan isn't that person. And I couldn't. His voice roughened. I couldn't let you marry him without at least saying something. Even though you're not offering an alternative. I'm your employer, Elena. There's a power imbalance that makes anything between us problematic at best. And He finally looked at me, and the weariness in his eyes was staggering. I'm not good for you. You know what I am, what I do. You deserve better than a man with blood on his hands and enemies who'd use you against him. Shouldn't I be the judge of what I deserve? Maybe. He turned back to his paperwork, the gesture a clear dismissal. But I've made my position clear. The rest is up to you. I stood there a moment longer, waiting for something more. An explanation, a confession, anything to make sense of the chaos he'd just unleashed in my carefully ordered world. But Declan had returned to his contracts, his face an unreadable mask. Finally, I returned to my desk, set the white box beside my computer, and tried to focus on work. But the words on my screen blurred, my thoughts returning again and again to 4 words that had changed everything. Don't marry him. The week following the dress incident passed in a fog of heightened awareness. Every interaction with Declan felt charged with subtext, weighted with things neither of us would say. He maintained his professional distance, never referencing our conversation, never treating me as anything other than his trusted secretary. But I caught him watching me sometimes, his expression unreadable when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I told no one about his offer. Not my mother, who was already planning the wedding reception with an enthusiasm that bordered on manic. Not my father, whose relief at having his debts erased by Marcus's generosity had restored something I'd thought permanently broken in him. Certainly not Marcus himself, who called dutifully every other evening to discuss wedding logistics with the detached politeness of someone scheduling a business meeting. Elena, darling, the florist needs a final decision on the centerpieces, my mother said during our weekly Sunday dinner. She'd been calling me darling for 6 months now, ever since Marcus had made his offer. Before that, I'd always been Elena or Honey. I know you said you were fine with whatever I chose, but this is your wedding. You should have an opinion. Whatever makes you happy, Mom. I pushed food around my plate, appetite non-existent. My father sat at the head of the table, looking healthier than he had in years. No longer gaunt from stress, no longer flinching at unexpected phone calls. Marcus's money had done that. Marcus's money and my agreement to become his wife. You seem distracted lately, my father observed, his gaze sharp despite the wine he'd been nursing. Everything all right at work? Fine, just busy. Mr. Sullivan has several major deals closing before the end of the quarter. My mother's expression soured slightly at Declan's name. She'd never liked my job, never approved of my working for a man with Declan Sullivan's reputation. I still think you should give notice after the wedding. Marcus can certainly provide for you. There's no need to work for that man anymore. That man pays me exceptionally well and treats me with respect, I said more sharply than intended. And I happen to enjoy my work. Of course, honey, but... My mother exchanged a glance with my father. It's just that Marcus mentioned he'd prefer his wife not work outside the home, at least not in that environment. It's not appropriate for a Brennan. The words landed like a slap. Marcus said that? He's thinking of your reputation. Darling, the Brennans are an old family. They have standards about their women being decorative and dependent. I set down my fork with more force than necessary. How very progressive of them. Elena Rose Quinn, watch your tone. My father's voice carried warning. Marcus has been generous to this family. The least you can do is respect his reasonable requests. Reasonable, that word again. Everything about this arrangement was supposedly reasonable. Reasonable to trade myself for my father's mistakes. Reasonable to give up work I was good at, work that mattered to me. Reasonable to become someone else entirely because Marcus Brennan's old money family had expectations about how their wives should behave. I need some air. I stood abruptly, grabbing my coat. I'll be back. I walked for over an hour through my neighborhood, the October chill biting through my jacket. The leaves had turned, painting the streets in shades of amber and rust. In 2 weeks, I'd be married. In 2 weeks, my life as Elena Quinn would effectively end, replaced by whatever version of myself fit Marcus Brennan's requirements. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your father's debt was $340,000. I've attached documentation of the full amount, including interest. If you'd like to discuss alternatives to your current arrangement, I'm available. DS. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Declan had never texted me before, never contacted me outside of work hours. The attachment showed a detailed breakdown of my father's gambling debts. Every bet, every loss, every dollar of compounding interest. The total made my stomach turn. $340,000. The price Marcus had paid for me. Another text appeared. This is not pressure, just information. Whatever you decide, I respect your choice. But you should know exactly what you're worth. My hands shook as I typed a response. Why are you doing this? The reply came quickly, because I should have said something 6 years ago. Before you ever believed the only value you had was as a solution to someone else's problem. I stood on the sidewalk, tears blurring my vision, reading and rereading his words. 6 years ago, I'd started working for Declan Sullivan fresh out of business school, desperate for a job that would let me help my family. I'd been 25, idealistic, convinced I could make a difference. He'd hired me despite my lack of experience, trained me personally, paid me more than any entry-level secretary had a right to expect. I'd fallen for him slowly. Not the dangerous reputation or the power he wielded, but the man I saw in quiet moments. The way he remembered small details about people's lives. His unexpected kindness to those who worked for him. The code of honor he maintained even in a world without rules. The intelligence that animated his face when discussing books or history or the 100 other subjects we'd explored during late nights at the office. But I'd never imagined he saw me as anything more than competent help. Never let myself hope that the careful distance he maintained was choice rather than indifference. I don't know what to do, I typed back. Then don't do anything. Not yet. Give yourself time to think without the pressure of an impending wedding. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Everything's arranged. My parents are counting on this. Your parents will survive disappointment. Can you survive a lifetime of being someone you're not? The question hit too close to home. I pocketed my phone and turned back toward my parents' house, mind churning with impossible choices. When I arrived at work Monday morning, there was a file on my desk. Unmarked, sealed with red wax that bore Declan's signet ring. Inside, I found documents that made my breath catch. Loan forgiveness papers for my father's debt. Not paid off by Marcus Brennan, but by an anonymous benefactor through a charitable foundation. Dated 2 weeks before Marcus had made his offer to my father. Someone had already cleared the debt. Marcus's generous gesture had been solving a problem that no longer existed. I burst into Declan's office without knocking, the file clutched in shaking hands. He looked up from his computer, unsurprised by my dramatic entrance. You paid it off, I said, my voice raw. 2 weeks before Marcus made his offer. You'd already taken care of it. Declan leaned back in his chair, expression carefully neutral. I've paid off debts for several employees over the years. It's not uncommon when someone's family situation affects their work performance. My work performance was fine. Your father was being threatened by bookmakers operating in my territory. That reflects poorly on me. His tone was professional, detached. I handled a business problem, nothing more. Bullshit. I threw the file on his desk. You knew. You knew Marcus was using my father's debt to manipulate me, and you didn't say anything. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger or guilt, I couldn't tell. I said nothing because I thought you wanted the arrangement. You accepted Marcus's proposal. You never indicated you felt coerced. Because I didn't know the debt was already paid. I thought... My voice cracked. I thought I was saving my family, and all this time there was nothing to save them from. Marcus was just... what? Buying a wife for the hell of it? Marcus Brennan has political ambitions, Declan said quietly. An old family name coupled with strategic business interests. He needs the right kind of wife, someone intelligent enough to be an asset, but grateful enough to be controlled. Your father's debt was just convenient leverage. The calculation of it, the cold manipulation, made me sick. And you let him. You knew what he was doing and you said nothing for 6 months. I respected your agency, Declan snapped, his control finally cracking. You're a grown woman, Elena. You made a choice. I didn't think it was my place to interfere in your personal life. But it is your place to pay off my father's debts without telling me. Yes. He stood, moving around the desk to face me. Because you're my employee and your family situation was affecting your work. Because I have the resources to help, and it costs me nothing. Because... He broke off, jaw clenching. Because why? I challenged, stepping closer. If this is just about business, why give me those documents now? Why tell me not to marry him? Why any of this? For a long moment he didn't answer. The office fell silent, except for the tick of the antique clock on his bookshelf, counting seconds that felt like hours. Because I can't watch you marry him, Declan finally said, his voice low and rough. Because I've spent 6 years keeping appropriate distance, maintaining professional boundaries, telling myself it was the right thing, and maybe it was. But I can't. His hands flexed at his sides. I won't stand there in 2 weeks and watch you promise yourself to someone else when I've wanted you since the day you walked into this office. The confession hung between us, raw and irrevocable. I stared at him, my heart hammering so hard I was certain he could hear it. You never said anything, I whispered. 6 years, Declan. 6 years of working together, of late nights and early mornings, of... My voice broke. I thought it was all in my head. I thought I was imagining the way you looked at me sometimes. You weren't imagining it. He reached out as if to touch my face, then caught himself, hand falling back to his side. But you worked for me. There's a power dynamic that makes any relationship ethically complicated. I wouldn't abuse that. Couldn't. So instead, you let me believe you felt nothing while I pressed a hand to my mouth, fighting tears. While I fell for you slowly enough that I didn't even realize it was happening until it was too late. His expression cracked, revealing something raw beneath the controlled exterior. Elena. I need to think. I backed toward the door. I can't be here right now. Take the day, he said quietly. Take the week if you need it. Your salary continues regardless. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Even now, even in the middle of this emotional maelstrom, he was thinking about my financial security. Is that what this is about? Making sure I'm taken care of? No, he said firmly. This is about giving you choices. Real choices, not obligations disguised as options. Whatever you decide, Elena, you'll make it because it's what you want. Not because of your father's debts or Marcus's manipulation or... He paused. Or my feelings. What I want doesn't matter unless it's what you want too. I studied his face, seeing him fully for perhaps the first time. Not my employer, not the feared man whose name carried weight throughout Chicago's underworld, but simply Declan. A man who'd spent 6 years maintaining distance while wanting more. Who'd solved my family's problem without asking for gratitude. Who was offering me freedom even though it might mean losing me. What do you want? I asked softly. His throat worked as he swallowed. Everything I can't have. Everything that wouldn't be good for you. Let me be the judge of what's good for me. Elena, I'm 45 years old. I've done things. He shook his head. You know what I am. What my business involves. You've seen enough in 6 years to understand the world I operate in. That's not a life I'd wish on anyone I cared about. But you're offering to pay off my father's debt anyway, to give me an out from Marcus. That's different. That's just money. But if you... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. If there was something between us, it wouldn't be just money. It would be danger. My enemies wouldn't hesitate to use you against me. You'd be a target. I'm already a target, I pointed out. I've been your secretary for 6 years. Anyone looking to hurt you knows exactly how important I am to your operations. He flinched at the truth of it. That's why I've always kept guards on this floor. Why Lachlan has instructions to prioritize your safety if anything happens. But being my secretary and being... He couldn't seem to say the word. That would paint an even bigger target on your back. Maybe I'm willing to take that risk. You shouldn't have to, he said fiercely. You deserve safety, peace, a normal life with someone who isn't constantly looking over his shoulder, who doesn't have enemies willing to do anything to bring him down. Someone like Marcus? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Someone who manipulated me into an engagement by letting me believe my family would suffer if I refused? That's your idea of a better option? No, he admitted. Marcus is a different kind of dangerous. Subtle, manipulative, but dangerous nonetheless. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something darker. But there are other options besides Marcus or me. You're brilliant, Elena. Capable. You could work anywhere. For anyone. You could... I don't want anywhere else. I interrupted. I don't want anyone else. I've spent 6 years here. With you. Building something that matters. I'm not giving that up. Even if staying means... Even then, I said firmly. Whatever happens with Marcus, whatever I decide, I'm not leaving Sullivan Enterprises. This is my choice, Declan. Let me make it. For a long moment, we stood there, the space between us charged with 6 years of denial and want. Then Declan nodded slowly, acceptance and resignation warring in his expression. I need to call Marcus, I said quietly. We need to talk. Do you want me there? The offer surprised me. Why would you be there? Because I'm the reason the debt was paid off. Because he deserves to know his leverage was built on a lie. Declan's voice hardened. And because if he tries to threaten or manipulate you, I want to be there to make sure he understands that's not acceptable. That sounds like jealousy, Mr. Sullivan. It is, he admitted without hesitation. But it's also practicality. Marcus won't take rejection well. He's invested too much in this match, not just money, but the image of marrying Patrick Quinn's daughter. He'll push back. I can handle Marcus. I know you can. His slight smile held approval. But you don't have to handle him alone. The offer was tempting, but something about it felt wrong. Like hiding behind Declan's protection rather than standing on my own feet. This is my decision to make and my mess to clean up. I need to do it myself. Declan studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Your choice. But Elena... He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a business card, pressing it into my palm. If things get difficult, call this number. Lachlan will come get you. No questions asked. I looked down at the card, then back at him. You really have thought of everything. I've had 6 years to think about keeping you safe, he said simply. This is what that looks like. I called Marcus that evening, requesting we meet at his office rather than a restaurant or his home. Neutral territory where I could maintain composure, where the conversation would stay civil because his staff might overhear. He agreed immediately, his tone pleasant, but with an undercurrent of curiosity. We rarely requested private meetings. Our engagement had been conducted mostly through my mother's enthusiastic planning and his dutiful participation. His office was in one of the newer high-rises downtown, all glass and steel and modern art that probably cost more than I made in a year. His secretary, a polished woman in her 50s, showed me into his private office with a knowing smile that made my skin crawl. Elena, this is a pleasant surprise. Marcus rose from behind his desk, perfectly groomed as always. Blonde hair styled just so, suit that probably cost thousands, smile that never quite reached his eyes. Is everything all right? No problems with the wedding arrangements, I hope. We need to talk, I said, not bothering with small talk. About the debt you paid off for my father. Something flickered in his expression, annoyance or wariness, gone too quickly to identify. What about it? I thought we agreed not to discuss that. It's taken care of. And when did you pay it? He blinked at the question. I'm sorry? When exactly did you pay off my father's gambling debts? I kept my voice level, professional. What was the date? Elena, I don't see why. Humor me. He studied me for a moment, then moved to his computer, pulling up what I assumed was financial records. March 15th. I wrote the check that afternoon, and your father signed the agreement that evening. Why does this matter? Because the debt was already paid, I said quietly. 2 weeks before you made your offer. Someone else had already cleared it through a charitable foundation. You didn't save my family from anything, Marcus. You just pretended you had. The color drained from his face, then returned in an angry flush. That's impossible. I personally verified the debt with the bookmakers. They confirmed what you wanted to hear, I interrupted. Or they lied because they didn't want to admit someone else had already handled it. Either way, the result is the same. You manipulated me into an engagement based on a problem that didn't exist. Marcus's jaw tightened. Who told you this? Was it Sullivan? Did that Irish thug put this idea in your head? Mr. Sullivan provided documentation, I said coolly. But the truth is the truth regardless of the source. Documentation that could easily be fabricated, Marcus shot back. Elena, think about this. Sullivan has reasons to want to break us up. He doesn't like that you're leaving his employ, and He paid the debt, I said flatly. 2 weeks before you made your offer. He cleared it quietly through a foundation he controls, and he never told me because he thought I should make my own choices. Bullshit. Marcus's cultured veneer cracked, revealing the anger beneath. If Sullivan paid it off, why didn't he tell you immediately? Why let you accept my proposal if he supposedly cares so much about your welfare? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself, because he believed I wanted the arrangement, because he respected my agency enough not to interfere in my personal decisions. How noble, Marcus sneered. The mob boss respects your agency. Do you hear yourself, Elena? Sullivan has played you. He paid off the debt to maintain control over you, to keep his competent secretary from leaving, and now he's trying to sabotage your future because he's losing his investment. I'm not an investment, I said, anger flaring. And I'm not your possession either. You manipulated me, Marcus. You let me believe my family would suffer if I didn't marry you. You let me think I was saving them when the truth is you just wanted a convenient wife. Convenient? His laugh was harsh. You think this is about convenience? Elena, I chose you specifically. Yes, I knew about the debt. Yes, I knew it would give me leverage. But I chose you because you're intelligent, poised, and you fit the image I need for my political future. That's not manipulation, that's strategy. It's the same thing, I said quietly. You reduced me to a strategic asset, a piece on your political chessboard. And what does Sullivan see you as? Marcus challenged. A woman he cares about? Or his incredibly competent secretary who knows too much about his illegal operations to ever be allowed to leave? At least I was honest about what I wanted. You lied about the debt. I omitted certain details, he corrected. That's not the same as lying, and regardless, we have an agreement. Your father signed papers, Elena. There are contracts. Breaking the engagement now would what? I stood, tired of his threats. Ruin my reputation? Make my father look bad? I don't care anymore. Marcus, I won't marry someone who sees me as an acquisition. Your father will care, he said coldly. Those papers he signed included provisions about financial recourse if the agreement was broken by your side. He'll owe me for the expenses I've incurred preparing for this wedding. Venue deposits, catering contracts, the engagement ring. He gestured to the diamond still on my finger. That alone is worth $40,000, plus compensation for the embarrassment of a canceled wedding so close to the date. My stomach dropped. How much? $200,000, he said, satisfaction creeping into his voice. Plus return of the ring and any gifts exchanged between our families. Your father doesn't have that kind of money, Elena. He'll be right back where he started, except now with legal debts instead of gambling ones. And this time, Sullivan won't be able to quietly pay them off without serious legal ramifications. I stared at him, realization dawning. You knew. When you drew up the agreement, you knew the debt had been paid. You built in protection so I couldn't leave without destroying my family. I built in standard provisions for broken contracts, he said smoothly. It's good business, and it protects both parties from acting impulsively based on cold feet or outside influence. This isn't cold feet, I said, my voice shaking with rage. This is me realizing I'm about to marry someone who sees me as property. I see you as my future wife, he corrected. A partner in building the life I want. That's not property, Elena. That's pragmatism. Love fades, passion dies, but shared goals and compatible values last. We could have a good life together if you'd stop letting Sullivan poison your mind against me. Mr. Sullivan has nothing to do with this, doesn't he? Marcus moved closer, his expression calculating. 6 years working closely with a powerful man. Late nights, private conversations, all that forced proximity. Did something happen between you two? Is that what this is really about? No. The lie felt necessary, protective of something too fragile to expose to Marcus's scrutiny. This is about you manipulating me into an engagement through false pretenses. Then prove it, he challenged. Call Sullivan right now. Tell him you're still marrying me and you appreciate his concern, but you're capable of making your own decisions. If this is really about us and not about him, that should be easy. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Declan's name in my contacts. Marcus was right about one thing. If this was truly about my autonomy, about refusing to be manipulated, then I should be able to reject Declan's influence as easily as Marcus's control. But the thought of calling Declan, of pushing him away to prove a point to Marcus, made something in my chest constrict painfully. I thought so, Marcus said, reading my hesitation correctly. This is about Sullivan. Whatever he's offered you, his protection, his money, his bed, it's not sustainable, Elena. Men like him don't commit. They don't marry. They take what they want and move on when something shinier appears. You don't know anything about him. I know his reputation. I know he's never been in a serious relationship, never shown interest in settling down. I know he's 45 years old and still living like he's untouchable. How long do you think his interest in you will last? Marcus's voice softened, becoming almost kind. I'm offering you security, Elena. A real future, not a fantasy based on sexual tension and proximity. I may not love you yet, but I respect you. I'd never put you in danger or ask you to compromise your morals by participating in illegal activities. You're asking me to compromise my dignity by staying in an engagement built on manipulation. I'm asking you to be practical, he countered. To think about what happens to your father if you break this agreement. To consider whether Sullivan's sudden interest is really about you or about maintaining control over his most valuable employee. To use that intelligence I chose you for and see this situation clearly. I removed the engagement ring slowly, setting it on his desk with a soft click. I see it very clearly, Marcus. You're controlling, manipulative, and willing to hurt my family to keep me in line. That's not partnership. That's ownership. His expression hardened. You have 24 hours to reconsider before I file the breach of contract suit against your father. After that, the legal proceedings begin. Do what you need to do, I said, moving toward the door. I'll find a way to handle the financial consequences, but I won't marry you. Elena. His voice stopped me at the door. I'm giving you a chance to think this through. To consider all the ramifications. If you walk out that door, if you break this agreement, you'll be burning bridges with one of Chicago's most influential families. That will have consequences beyond just money. The threat was clear. Is that supposed to scare me? It's supposed to make you think strategically. You're smarter than this, Elena. Don't throw away a secure future for a fantasy that will never materialize. I left without responding, my hands shaking as I waited for the elevator. Only when I was safely in my car did I allow myself to break down, tears of anger and fear and relief streaming down my face. I'd done it, broken the engagement, chosen freedom over security. Now I just had to figure out how to protect my father from the consequences. I drove to Declan's estate, not his office but his home, needing to see him somewhere without the professional boundaries, without the weight of employer and employee complicating everything. His gatekeeper recognized my car and let me through without question. Apparently I was on an approved list, though I'd never visited before. The house was smaller than I'd expected, elegant but not ostentatious. Stone and wood and large windows overlooking a private garden. Lachlan met me at the door, his expression carefully neutral as always. "Miss Quinn, Mr. Sullivan is in the library. I'll let him know you're here." "Thank you, Lachlan." Declan appeared within moments, concern etched on his face. He'd changed from his work clothes into dark slacks and a gray sweater that softened his appearance. "Elena, what happened? Are you all right?" "I broke it off," I said, the words tumbling out. "I told Marcus I wasn't going to marry him. He's threatening to sue my father for breach of contract. 200,000 plus expenses. He built protection into the agreement so I couldn't leave without financial consequences." "Son of a bitch," Declan said quietly. "I should have anticipated that. Brennan's always been careful about covering his exposure." "I don't care about the money," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. "I'll find a way to pay it. Get a loan, work extra jobs, whatever it takes. But I couldn't—" My voice cracked. I couldn't marry him, not after knowing the truth. Declan guided me into the library, settling me on a leather sofa before pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed me one, then sat beside me, close but not touching. "The 200,000 is handled," he said quietly. "I'll have it transferred tomorrow." "No." I set down the glass. "I can't let you pay my way out of this. That's just trading one obligation for another." "It's not an obligation," he said firmly. "It's cleaning up a mess Brennan created by manipulating you. That's on him, not you." "But I'd owe you." "You'd owe me nothing," he interrupted. "Elena, I'm not Marcus. I'm not keeping score, not expecting repayment. This is just—" He paused. "This is me protecting someone I care about from a predator who used her father's weakness against her. You can't just throw money at every problem I have." "Why not?" He met my gaze steadily. "I have more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What good is it if I can't help the people who matter?" "Because it creates a power imbalance," I said, echoing his own words from before. "Because I'd always wonder if you were helping because you wanted to, or because you felt obligated, because I need to stand on my own feet." "Then work for me," he said. "Not as my secretary. You're overqualified for that anyway. As my COO, Chief Operating Officer for the legitimate businesses. Same salary you'd get anywhere else for that position, which happens to be enough to pay off 200,000 in a few years while still living comfortably." I stared at him. "You're offering me a promotion?" "I'm offering you a job you're qualified for and have been essentially doing already. You know my businesses as well as I do. You have relationships with our major clients. You're brilliant with logistics and personnel management." He leaned forward. "This isn't charity, Elena. It's recognizing that I've been wasting your talents by keeping you in a secretary role because I was too selfish to promote you." "Why were you selfish about it?" His smile was rueful. "Because promoting you would have meant meetings where other executives would see you. Business trips where I'd have to share your attention. A different dynamic that might have created more distance instead of less." He shook his head. "I kept you close by keeping you as my secretary. It was selfish and short-sighted, and I'm sorry. I liked being your secretary," I admitted softly. "I liked the proximity, the conversations, the way you trusted me with things you didn't trust anyone else with." "That won't change," he assured me. "You'd still work closely with me, just with appropriate compensation and title." And the $200,000? Paid tomorrow. Consider it a signing bonus. I laughed despite everything. That's a hell of a signing bonus. You're a hell of an employee. He sobered. Elena, I need you to understand something. This offer stands whether or not anything personal develops between us. Whether you decide you want to explore whatever this is. He gestured between us. Or whether you decide to keep things professional. Either way, you deserve this position and this salary. What do you want? I asked, the question I'd been afraid to voice. His throat worked. Everything I shouldn't. Time with you that isn't about work. Conversations that don't have to stay professional. The right to be jealous when other men look at you. The knowledge that when you go home at night, you're thinking about me the way I've been thinking about you for 6 years. He paused. But more than any of that, I want you to be happy, free, making choices because they're what you genuinely want, not because you're trapped by circumstances or obligations. And if what I want involves you, then I'd be the luckiest bastard alive, he said quietly. But Elena, you need time. Time to process breaking your engagement. Time to figure out who you are without the weight of your father's mistakes, or Marcus's manipulation, or my own influence. I don't want to be a rebound or a rebellion. If something happens between us, I want it to be real. The wisdom in his words made my chest ache. He was right, of course. I'd spent 6 months preparing to marry Marcus, 6 years before that building walls around my feelings for Declan. I needed space to think clearly. So we're back to professional, I said, trying to keep disappointment from my voice. For now, he agreed. But Elena... He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture so tender it stole my breath. I've waited 6 years. I can wait a little longer. Declan was true to his word. By noon the next day, Marcus's breach of contract suit was settled. $200,000 transferred from Sullivan Enterprises to Marcus Brennan's accounts, plus return of the engagement ring and all gifts exchanged between our families. My father called within hours, his voice tight with panic. Elena, what have you done? Marcus says the wedding is off, that you broke the engagement. Do you have any idea what this means? It means I'm not marrying someone who manipulated us both, I said, keeping my voice calm. The financial consequences are handled, Dad. You don't owe anyone anything. Handled how? Elena, the contract penalties were paid, all of it. You're clear. Silence. Then, who paid it? Does it matter? It matters if you've just traded one obligation for another. His voice cracked. God, Elena, I never wanted this for you. Never wanted you sacrificing yourself because of my mistakes. I'm not sacrificing anything, I said gently. I'm making choices. And Dad? The debt you thought Marcus paid off? It was already cleared 2 weeks before he made his offer. He manipulated both of us. More silence as he processed this. Who cleared it? A charitable foundation. Does it matter? The point is, Marcus lied. He let us believe we owed him when we didn't. My father's sharp intake of breath told me he understood the implications. That son of a bitch. He played us. Yes, but it's over now. I'm not marrying him. The financial obligations are settled, and you can stop feeling guilty about debts you don't actually owe. I owe whoever paid those penalties, he countered. 200,000, Elena. That's not nothing. It's handled, I repeated. Trust me on this. After I hung up, I found Declan in his office, reviewing contracts. He looked up when I entered, concern evident. How did it go? As well as could be expected. My father feels guilty about the money. He shouldn't. This is on Brennan, not him. Declan set aside his work. How are you holding up? Better than I should be, probably. I sat across from him, grateful for the normalcy of this familiar office, this man who'd been a constant in my life for 6 years. My mother is devastated. She'd already ordered the flowers. I'll reimburse her for any non-refundable deposits. Declan, you can't just... Yes, I can. His tone left no room for argument. Your mother got excited about planning a wedding that isn't happening. The least I can do is make sure she's not out of pocket for it. I studied him, this powerful man who wielded such control over so much, yet consistently used that power to protect rather than exploit. Why are you so good to me? He was quiet for a long moment, his expression complex. Do you want the honest answer, or the professional one? Honest. Because 6 years ago, you walked into my office for an interview. You were nervous, clearly out of your depth, but you looked me in the eye and answered every question with a directness that impressed me. When I asked why you wanted to work for a man with my reputation, you said, because reputation and reality aren't always the same thing, and I'd rather form my own opinion based on evidence than secondhand gossip. His slight smile held memory. Right then, I knew you were dangerous to me. Dangerous? To my peace of mind. To the careful distance I maintained from personal connections. To every defense I'd built to protect myself and the people around me from the complications of genuine feeling. He leaned back in his chair. I hired you anyway. Told myself I was strong enough to maintain professional boundaries. And I was, for about 3 months. Then you started staying late to help with the Donovan acquisition, bringing coffee without being asked, anticipating what I'd need before I knew I needed it, being so goddamn competent and kind and intelligent that I couldn't not notice you. My heart hammered in my chest. You never said anything, because you worked for me, because I'm 20 years older than you, because my world is dangerous and you deserved better, because... He paused. Because I was a coward. I told myself keeping distance was ethical, when really I was just afraid. Afraid of what? Of wanting something I couldn't control. Of caring about someone enough that their safety would become my first priority. Of giving someone the power to hurt me. His gaze held mine. I've built an empire, Elena. I've faced down rivals who wanted me dead. I've made impossible decisions and lived with consequences that would break most people. But the thought of telling you how I felt, of risking rejection, or worse, ruining what we had, that scared me more than anything else ever has. The confession hung between us, raw and vulnerable. I'd never heard Declan speak this way, never seen him stripped of the armor he wore so effortlessly. And now? I asked softly. Now I'm still afraid, he admitted. But losing you to Marcus was worse than any fear, so here I am, making myself vulnerable and hoping to God you don't destroy me with it. I moved around the desk, standing close enough to feel his warmth. I've loved you for 4 years, I said, the words finally freed. Not the powerful man everyone else sees, the person behind that, the one who remembers staff birthdays and makes sure the cleaning crew gets Christmas bonuses and reads constantly because you're always trying to understand things better. The man who once spent 2 hours helping me untangle a filing error because you knew I was stressed about making mistakes, who recommended books you thought I'd enjoy and remembered I don't like coffee after 3 p.m. because it affects my sleep. His hand came up slowly, cupping my face with a gentleness that belied his reputation. Elena, I loved you, I continued, and convinced myself it didn't matter, that you'd never see me as anything more than competent help, that pining for my boss was pathetic. So I buried it. Accepted Marcus's proposal because it was practical, and it meant I'd have to stop torturing myself with what I couldn't have. You never tortured yourself alone, he said quietly. Every day you walked into this office was another exercise in restraint. Every time you smiled at me, every time your hand brushed mine passing papers, every late night when we were alone and I could almost pretend we were just 2 people without all the complications. His voice roughened. I've never wanted anything the way I've wanted you. Then have me, I whispered, closing the remaining distance between us. His control snapped. Declan pulled me into his lap, his mouth finding mine with a hunger that 6 years of denial had only intensified. I melted into him, fingers tangling in his hair, body pressed against his with a desperation that should have embarrassed me. But nothing had ever felt more right than being in his arms, being kissed like I was air and he was drowning. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "This changes everything," he said, his voice rough. "It doesn't have to. We can—" "Elena, it changes everything," he repeated firmly. "Because now that I've had you in my arms, now that I've kissed you, I'm not letting you go. Which means we need to have some difficult conversations about what this looks like. Such as you're about to be connected romantically to someone with significant enemies, people who'd use you against me without hesitation." His hands tightened on my waist. "Such as how we handle the professional complications of dating someone who works for me, even if that someone is now technically a peer rather than a subordinate. Such as the fact that I'm in a dangerous business, and there are aspects of my life you've carefully avoided knowing too much about that you can't avoid anymore if we're together." "I know what you are," I said quietly. "I've known for years. Knowing and living with it daily are different things. I don't want you to—" "Declan." I framed his face with my hands, forcing him to meet my eyes. "I've spent 6 years filing reports that use coded language to disguise shipments that aren't entirely legal. I've taken calls from people whose names are whispered with fear. I've seen enough to understand exactly what your business involves, and I stayed anyway. Not because I didn't know better, but because I saw how you operate, the lines you won't cross, the code you maintain even in a world without rules. I'm not naive about who you are." "But are you prepared to be mine publicly?" he challenged. "For people to know that hurting you would be the fastest way to get to me? For your life to be complicated by security protocols and potential danger? Are you prepared for people to know you're dating an ex-secretary 20 years your junior? For rivals to see that as weakness? For your mother to probably have opinions about your life choices?" His startled laugh told me I'd scored a point. "My mother will adore you. She's been telling me to find someone with sense and settle down for 2 decades. Then we'll deal with whatever comes," I said firmly. "Together. Because, Declan, I'm not afraid of your world. I'm afraid of spending my life wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to reach for what I wanted." He studied my face, searching for doubt or hesitation. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because his expression softened. "There are things you should know, things I've kept from you to maintain deniability." "Such as?" "Such as I've had a protection detail on you for 3 years. Since the Moretti situation when they were targeting people close to me, Lachlan has had orders to prioritize your safety above mine if necessary." I thought about the times I'd noticed the same cars near my apartment, the way certain men in coffee shops always seemed to be leaving when I did. "I suspected." "And you never said anything? Would it have changed anything if I had?" His slight smile held approval. "Probably not. What else have you suspected?" "That my father's debt was paid off before Marcus made his offer. That you've been sending anonymous bonuses through the payroll system disguised as performance reviews. That you vetoed the Carlson deal last year, not because the numbers didn't work, but because Carlson had a reputation for sexual harassment, and you didn't want our female employees exposed to that." I paused. "That you've been in love with me almost as long as I've been in love with you. The last one took me longer to admit than it should have," he conceded. "The rest you're entirely correct about. Anything else?" "I suspect," I said slowly, "that there are things you've done to protect me that I don't know about. Threats you've neutralized, problems you've solved. And I suspect Marcus's sudden willingness to settle the breach of contract suit for exactly what he was owed, without fighting or dragging it out, wasn't actually sudden." His expression went carefully neutral. What makes you say that? Because Marcus is vindictive. He should have fought, should have tried to extract more or publicly humiliate me. Instead, he settled within 24 hours for exactly the contracted amount. I met his gaze steadily. Someone made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Someone convinced him that pursuing this wasn't in his best interest. Would that bother you? That you protected me? No. I ran my fingers through his hair, marveling at my right to touch him this way. That you might have threatened him? A little. I'd prefer to fight my own battles. I didn't threaten him, Declan said carefully. I simply had a conversation where I mentioned that continuing to harass my chief operating officer would be bad for his political ambitions. That certain information about his business practices might become public. That connections he relied on might suddenly become unavailable. You blackmailed him. I informed him of consequences, he corrected. What he chose to do with that information was entirely his decision. I should have been horrified. Should have pushed back against this demonstration of exactly the kind of power Declan wielded. Instead, I felt protected, safe, like having someone in my corner who wouldn't let me be hurt by manipulative men with more power than ethics. Thank you, I said quietly. For blackmailing your ex-fiancée? For seeing I was in a difficult situation and helping me out of it. I kissed him softly. For being on my side. Elena, I'm always on your side. His hands framed my face. That's not changing whether we're together or not. He paused, seeming to search for words. You're important. You have been since the day you walked into my office with nervous bravado and determination. That's not about romance or attraction. That's about recognizing someone exceptional and wanting to protect them. I can protect myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't always have to. He pulled me closer, his voice dropping. Let me help. Let me use the considerable resources I have to make your life easier. Not because you can't handle things yourself, but because you matter enough to me that your struggles are mine too. It should have felt suffocating. Should have triggered every warning about maintaining independence and not becoming someone's responsibility. But coming from Declan, knowing him as I did, it felt different. Like partnership. Like having someone who saw my strength, but also wanted to share the burden of being strong. Okay, I whispered. We'll try this. Together. His smile was brilliant, transforming his face. Together, he agreed, then more seriously. But Elena, slowly. Let's take time to figure this out without pressure or expectations. I want to court you properly. Take you to dinner. Have conversations that aren't about work. Discover who we are together without the weight of 6 years of denial complicating things. Court me? I couldn't help smiling. How very old-fashioned. I'm 45 and Irish. Old-fashioned is in my DNA. His thumb brushed over my lips. Besides, you deserve romance. Proper dates, thoughtful gestures, the knowledge that someone is choosing you deliberately rather than falling into convenience. I'd like that, I admitted. Though we should probably discuss the work situation. If I'm your COO and we're dating, there will be talk. Let them talk. Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me directly. His voice hardened slightly. And HR will be informed that you earned the position based on 6 years of exemplary work and exceptional skill. Anyone suggesting otherwise will find themselves having a very uncomfortable conversation. I laughed despite myself. Threatening people on my behalf is becoming a habit for you. Not threatening, clarifying expectations. He stood, setting me gently on my feet. Now, as your boss and the man who wants to take you to dinner Friday night, I suggest you spend the rest of the afternoon reviewing the quarterly reports I left on your new desk. Your office is 3 doors down, corner unit with the view you mentioned liking. You already set up an office for me? I had it prepared yesterday. I was confident you'd accept the COO position regardless of what happened between us personally. His smile was warm. Have I mentioned you're brilliant and I'm lucky to have you? Not in so many words. But I'll accept the compliment. As I moved toward the door, he caught my hand. Elena, thank you for being brave enough to break your engagement, for choosing what you wanted over what was expected. I know that wasn't easy. It was terrifying, I admitted. But staying would have been worse. After I left his office, I found my way to the new workspace he'd prepared. Corner office, just as he'd said, with windows overlooking the city and furniture far nicer than anything I'd had before. On the desk sat a single red rose in a crystal vase and a note in Declan's precise handwriting, to new beginnings, and to having the courage to reach for what we want. I sank into the leather chair, looking out at the city sprawled below, and felt something shift in my chest. Relief. Joy. Hope. For 6 years, I'd loved Declan Sullivan from a careful distance. Now, finally, I could love him openly. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges. His dangerous world, the age difference, the professional complications. But sitting in this office, he'd prepared for me, holding his note like a promise. I felt ready to face whatever came. Together. We'd face it together. Our first official date was postponed 3 times. Not because either of us wanted to delay, but because Declan's world didn't pause for romance. A shipment went missing, the legitimate kind, but valuable enough to require his personal attention. Then one of his warehouse managers was arrested on unrelated charges, necessitating lawyers and careful management to ensure the situation didn't expose anything it shouldn't. Then the Moretti family, quiet for 3 years, suddenly made noise about territorial boundaries. I watched him handle each crisis with the calm efficiency I'd admired for 6 years, but now I saw the toll it took. The tension in his shoulders when he thought no one was looking. The way he rubbed his left temple when stress mounted. The careful control he maintained even as problems multiplied. You need to rest, I said Thursday evening, finding him still at his desk at 9 p.m. Whatever that contract says, it'll say the same thing tomorrow. It's the Moretti situation, he said, not looking up from the documents spread before him. They're pushing boundaries again, testing to see if I'll respond. And will you? Depends on whether they're genuinely challenging territory or just posturing. He finally looked at me, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. Either way, it requires careful handling. The wrong move could trigger a war neither of us can afford. I moved behind his chair, hands settling on his shoulders. After a moment's hesitation, I began massaging the knotted muscles there. He tensed initially, then gradually relaxed under my touch. Tell me about the Morettis, I said quietly. Not the official version, the real one. He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, 5 years ago, Vincenzo Moretti tried to expand into territory I controlled. We had a disagreement about boundaries. It got violent. People died. His voice was flat, emotionless. I made it clear that further incursions would be met with decisive response. He backed down. We've had an uneasy peace since then. What changed? Vincenzo died 6 months ago. His son Roberto took over. Roberto is young, ambitious, and doesn't respect the old agreements. Declan's jaw tightened. He sees my age as weakness, thinks I'm vulnerable. Are you? Depends on the metric. He caught my hand, bringing it to his lips. Physically, I'm not what I was 20 years ago, but I have resources, loyalty, and experience Roberto lacks. The question is whether he's smart enough to recognize that before forcing a confrontation. And if he's not, then I deal with it. The casualness of the statement didn't disguise the steel beneath. I've survived this long by being very good at dealing with threats. I came around the desk, perching on the edge so I could see his face. How good? His eyes met mine, and I saw the truth he'd kept carefully hidden for 6 years. Good enough that people fear disappointing me more than they fear death. Good enough that my reputation often solves problems before violence becomes necessary. Good enough that when it does come to violence, it's swift and final. You've killed people. Not a question. I'd known, intellectually, but hearing him confirm it was different. Yes. No excuse, no justification, just acknowledgement. Does that change things for you? I thought about it, really considered what he was telling me. Declan Sullivan had killed people. Would likely kill again if circumstances required. The man I loved was capable of violence I'd only glimpsed around the edges of his carefully maintained public persona. No, I said finally, because I know you. I know the code you live by, the lines you won't cross. I know you don't kill casually or without cause. That doesn't make it right, but it doesn't change how I feel about you. Relief flickered across his face, quickly controlled. I need you to understand what that means, Elena. Need you to be clear-eyed about who you're choosing. I've done things I'm not proud of. Things that were necessary but not good. And there will likely be more violence in my future because that's the world I operate in. I understand. Do you? He stood, taking my hands in his. Because once we're together publicly, once people know you matter to me, you become leverage. You become a target. And I can protect you, will protect you with everything I have, but I can't eliminate all risk. There will always be danger. There's danger in living, Declan. Crossing streets, driving cars, trusting the wrong people. You've already been protecting me for years. This just makes it official. It makes you mine, he corrected quietly. In a world where that carries significant weight, people will know that hurting you is the fastest way to hurt me. That makes you valuable to my enemies. Then we'll be careful. I squeezed his hands. But I'm not walking away because your life is complicated. I'm walking toward it, eyes open, knowing exactly what I'm choosing. His kiss was tender, almost reverent. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Then come home with me tonight, he said against my lips. Not for, I just want you there, want to fall asleep knowing you're safe under my roof. The invitation was intimate in ways that had nothing to do with sex. Trusting me in his private space, sharing his life beyond the office. I nodded, and something in his expression eased. His home was 20 minutes outside the city, a converted brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. Security was discreet but present. Cameras, reinforced doors, armed guards who nodded respectfully as we entered. Inside, the space reflected the man I'd come to know. Books everywhere, comfortable furniture that invited use rather than admiration, artwork that was beautiful but not showy. It's lovely, I said, taking in the warm tones and lived-in feel. Very you. Lachlan lives in the coach house, Declan explained, gesturing toward the back of the property visible through large windows, along with 2 others on rotating security. They're always here, always watching. You'll need to get used to that. I've had a protection detail for 3 years, I reminded him. I'm used to being watched. This is different. This is my home, where I'm supposed to be able to relax. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handing me one. I hate that I can't give you complete privacy, that there are always others nearby, aware of our movements. They're keeping us safe. I can live with that. I sipped the wine, something rich and complex, probably expensive. Declan, I meant what I said. I'm choosing this life, complications and all. He drew me close, and we stood like that for long moments, just holding each other. Eventually, he showed me to the guest room, spacious and comfortable, with an attached bathroom. I'll be down the hall if you need anything, he said. Tomorrow, if the Moretti situation hasn't escalated, I'm taking you to dinner. Proper date, no interruptions, just us. I'd like that. But the next day brought new complications. I arrived at the office to find Declan in a video conference with someone whose face I couldn't see, but whose voice carried authority. When he ended the call, his expression was grim. "Roberto Moretti wants a meeting," he said without preamble. "Tomorrow night. Neutral location. Just the two of us and our seconds." "That's the night of our date." "I know. I'm sorry." He dragged a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "But I can't ignore this. If Roberto is offering to talk rather than act, I need to take that opportunity." "I understand." And I did, though disappointment curled through me. "Reschedule the date. Handle the Moretti situation. We have time." "Do we?" He looked at me intently. "Elena, I'm 45. I've spent 6 years keeping distance between us. Now that we're finally here, finally together, I don't want to waste time. I want—" He broke off, seeming to struggle with words. "I want everything. Marriage, a life together, the future I've been afraid to let myself imagine. And that means dealing with threats like Roberto quickly so we can focus on us." My heart stuttered at the word marriage, so casually deployed. "You're thinking that far ahead." "I've been thinking that far ahead for 4 years, he admitted. "Ever since the night we worked until 3 a.m. on the Donovan acquisition, and you fell asleep at your desk. I covered you with my jacket and sat there watching you sleep, thinking how much I wanted the right to carry you to bed, to wake up beside you, to have you in my life permanently rather than just during business hours." His voice roughened. "So yes, Elena, I'm thinking that far ahead. If that's too much, too fast, tell me now." "It's not too much," I whispered. "It's terrifying and perfect and exactly what I want too." His kiss was deep, claiming, full of promise. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "After the Moretti meeting, after I've secured our safety and future, then we'll have that date, and every date after that until you're sick of me. I won't get sick of you. You say that now. Wait until you've lived with my tendency to work through dinner or my complete inability to remember where I left my reading glasses." I laughed despite the tension. "I've worked with those quirks for 6 years. I think I can handle them in a relationship." The meeting with Roberto Moretti was scheduled for Saturday evening at a restaurant owned by neutral parties. Declan spent Friday and Saturday morning preparing, reviewing intelligence, consulting with advisors, ensuring every contingency was covered. "I want you here," he said Saturday afternoon, finding me in my new office. "In the building, where I know you're protected. Lachlan will stay with you. I'm taking Marco and Dennis to the meeting." "You think Roberto might try something?" "I think Roberto is young and unpredictable. Better safe than sorry." He pressed a key into my palm. "This opens the safe in my office. Top drawer on the right side. If something happens to me, if the meeting goes wrong, there are instructions inside. Bank accounts, contacts, everything you'd need to get somewhere safe." Fear clutched at my chest. "Declan, just a precaution," he said firmly. "Nothing will happen, but I won't have you unprepared if the worst occurs." I threw my arms around him, holding tight. "Come back to me. Whatever Roberto wants, whatever posturing he needs to do, just come back. Always," he promised against my hair. "Elena, you're what I've been working toward for 6 years. I'm not losing you now." He left at 6, Marco and Dennis flanking him. I watched from the window as they drove away, then returned to my office where Lachlan stood guard outside. The minutes crawled past. 7 p.m., 7:30, 8. At 8:15, Lachlan's phone rang. His expression went carefully blank as he listened. Then he stepped into my office. "Miss Quinn, there's been a development. Mr. Sullivan needs you at Roosevelt Memorial Hospital. He's stable," he added quickly, seeing my face. "But he's asking for you." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur. Lachlan wouldn't tell me more, just repeated that Declan was stable and conscious, We pulled up to a private entrance where more of Declan's security waited. They led me to a private floor, then to a room where I found Declan sitting up in bed, his shirt off, a doctor wrapping bandages around his ribs. His face was bruised, one eye swelling, but he was alive and whole. Roberto didn't want to talk, he said by way of greeting. He wanted to make a point about not respecting boundaries. We disagreed. Are you all right? Cracked ribs, some bruising, nothing serious. He winced as the doctor secured the bandages. Roberto came off worse. He's 3 floors down getting his jaw wired shut. I should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from this evidence of violence. Instead, I felt overwhelming relief that Declan was alive and relatively unharmed. What happens now? Now the Morettis understand that I'm still capable of defending my territory. That age hasn't made me weak. His good eye found mine, and now I keep the promise I made you. Once I'm cleared to leave, we're going on that date, even if I have to do it with cracked ribs. Declan, you need to rest. I need to take you to dinner, he countered stubbornly. I need to prove that our life together isn't always going to be interrupted by business, that I can prioritize you over everything else. The doctor finished his work and left, shaking his head. When we were alone, I moved to Declan's bedside, taking his uninjured hand. You don't have to prove anything. I know what your life involves. I'm not expecting you to suddenly become someone who can ignore threats or avoid violence. But I want to be that person for you, he said quietly. Want to give you a life where dates aren't canceled and evenings aren't interrupted, and you don't spend hours worrying whether I'm coming home alive. That's not realistic. No, he agreed, but I can try to minimize it. Can work toward a future where the business is stable enough that I'm not constantly handling crises, where we have time for us. How long until you're released? Doctor says tomorrow morning if there are no complications. Then tomorrow afternoon we're going on that date, cracked ribs and all. I leaned forward carefully, kissing him gently. Because, Declan, I don't need perfect. I just need you. His arms came around me, holding me close despite obvious pain. You have me, Elena. You've always had me. I was just too afraid to admit it. We stayed like that until a nurse came to check his vitals. Then I settled into the chair beside his bed, holding his hand. Lachlan stood guard outside the door. Security flanked the hallways. It wasn't romantic, wasn't the evening either of us had planned, but it was real. It was us. And somehow, that was enough. True to his word, Declan took me to dinner Sunday evening. He moved carefully, one hand occasionally pressing against his wrapped ribs, but his determination was evident. He'd chosen an elegant Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood, family-owned, with a private dining room that afforded us both privacy and security. You look beautiful, he said, when I met him at his home, dressed in the deep green dress I'd bought specifically for our first proper date. His bruises had darkened overnight, but he'd shaved carefully and wore a dark suit that minimized the visible injuries. You look like you should be in bed. I'm exactly where I should be. He offered his arm, and I took it gently, hyper-aware of his injuries. Elena, I know the timing isn't ideal. I know I'm not at my best right now, but I've waited 6 years for this. I'm not waiting any longer. The restaurant was everything he'd promised. Warm lighting, excellent food, attentive service that knew when to disappear. We talked for hours, not about work or the Moretti situation, but about everything else. Books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, childhood memories and dreams for the future. My mother wants to meet you, Declan said over dessert. She's been asking pointed questions about why I suddenly have a woman in my life. Pointed questions? Whether you're after my money, whether you're using me, whether I'm having a midlife crisis. His smile was wry. The usual maternal concerns when her 45-year-old son suddenly admits to being in love. Mom, the casual way he said it, being in love, made my breath catch. And what did you tell her? That you're brilliant, kind, and have been keeping my life organized for 6 years. That you could make 3 times your salary working for any number of my competitors, but you've stayed loyal. That you're not after my money, because you've never asked for anything. He reached across the table, taking my hand. That I've been in love with you for far too long to qualify as a crisis, midlife or otherwise. When can I meet her? Next Sunday. Family dinner. Fair warning, my mother is formidable and won't hesitate to interrogate you. My sister will be there too, equally protective and even more direct. He paused. If you're not ready, I'm ready. And I was. Ready to meet the people who mattered to him, to be integrated into his life fully rather than just the professional sphere. The week that followed fell into a new rhythm. I moved into Declan's home, my apartment seeming suddenly small and lonely after nights spent in his space. We'd wake early, have breakfast together before heading to the office. Work remained professional. We were careful about maintaining appropriate boundaries in front of staff. But evenings were ours. He taught me to cook his grandmother's recipe for soda bread. I introduced him to the mystery novels I loved. We argued good-naturedly about politics and laughed over shared memories from 6 years of working together. It was domestic and normal and perfect. But the specter of the Moretti situation lingered. Roberto had been hospitalized for 3 days. When he was released, word came that he was angry, humiliated, and making noise about retaliation. He won't do anything immediately, Declan assured me Thursday evening as we reviewed the latest intelligence. He's smart enough to know a direct attack right now would be too obvious. But eventually, he'll make a move. How do you live like this? I asked, frustration bleeding through. Constantly waiting for the next threat, the next crisis? You get used to it. And you build protections. Legal ones where possible, other kinds when necessary. He pulled me close, careful of his still healing ribs. But Elena, I won't lie to you. This is my life. There will always be someone testing boundaries, challenging territory. It comes with the power I've built. What if you walked away, retired, left the business to someone else? That's not how this works. I can't just resign. The only way out is being forced out, and that typically ends badly. His voice was gentle but firm. I'm in this until I die, whether that's in 30 years or 30 days. That's the reality you're choosing if you stay with me. The stark honesty should have scared me. Instead, it clarified things. This was Declan's world, and I either accepted it fully or walked away. There was no middle ground. Then I stay, I said simply. Whatever comes. Sunday dinner at his mother's house was both terrifying and wonderful. Moira Sullivan was indeed formidable, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s who assessed me with the thoroughness of someone who'd spent decades navigating dangerous waters beside Declan's father. So you're the girl who's had my son in knots for 6 years, she said by way of greeting, her Irish accent thicker than Declan's. About time he did something about it. His sister Bridget was warmer, pulling me into a hug. Thank God. I was beginning to think he'd die alone, surrounded by business contracts and regret. Over pot roast and potatoes, they told stories about Declan's childhood. His stubborn refusal to back down from fights even when outmatched, his protectiveness of his younger siblings, the way he'd taken over the family business at 25 when his father died, growing it beyond anything anyone had imagined. He's a good man, Moira said as we cleared dishes, Declan and Bridget deep in conversation in the other room. Harder than he should have had to be, burdened with responsibilities too young. But good, loyal, protective of those he loves. I know, I said softly. Do you? Her sharp eyes assessed me. Do you understand what it means to love a man like my son? The danger, the secrets, the nights you'll spend wondering if he's coming home? I spent 6 years watching him operate. I understand what his life involves. Watching and living are different things, girl. When you're just his secretary, you're removed from the worst of it. But as his woman, you're in the thick of it. Every enemy will know your name. Every rival will see you as leverage. She gripped my arm, surprisingly strong. I loved my husband desperately, but I buried him at 52. Declan's followed the same path, built the same kind of power. Are you prepared to potentially bury him young too? The question hung between us, brutal in its honesty. Was I prepared for that? For the possibility that the man I loved might not live to old age, might be taken by violence inherent to his world. I hope I never have to, I said finally. But yes, I'd rather have whatever time we get than spend my life wondering what might have been. Moira studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You'll do. Welcome to the family, Elena. The acceptance was matter of fact but genuine. Over dessert, Bridget asked about wedding plans, earning a warning look from Declan. We've been officially together for 2 weeks, he reminded her. Give us time. Time for what? You've known each other 6 years. You're 45, not a boy with unlimited time to figure things out. Bridget turned to me. Has he asked you yet? Bridget. Declan's warning tone made his sister smile. I'll take that as a no. Well, when he does, call me. I have opinions about venues. The easy acceptance, the assumption that marriage was inevitable rather than merely possible, was both daunting and wonderful. They saw us as permanent, as already family. On the drive home, Declan was quiet. I let him think, watching the city lights blur past. Finally, he spoke. They're right, you know, about not having unlimited time. I'm not young anymore, Elena. Every year brings new challenges, new rivals, new threats. If something happens to me, don't. If something happens to me, he continued firmly, I want you protected, want you taken care of. That means legal protections. Marriage, wills, trusts. The kind of documentation that ensures you're safe, regardless of what happens. That's your proposal? Legal protections? He laughed, the sound rough. No, that's my practicality talking. My proposal, when it comes, will be better than that. When it comes. Did you think I was joking about wanting everything? About thinking that far ahead? He pulled the car over, turning to face me. Elena, I love you. I've loved you for years. And yes, there's danger in my world. Yes, there are threats and complications. But I want you with me through all of it. Want you as my wife, my partner, my everything. That sounds like a proposal. It's a prelude to one. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. I bought this 3 years ago, kept it in my desk drawer, taking it out sometimes when I was alone, imagining a future where I was brave enough to offer it to you. Then you got engaged to Marcus, and I put it away, convinced I'd missed my chance. He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. This is what I wanted to give you then, what I want to give you now, if you'll have it. The ring was perfect, unique, beautiful, chosen specifically for me. Declan, you don't have to answer now, he said quickly. I know it's fast, know we're still figuring things out, but I want you to have this. Want you to know that I'm serious about us, about our future. Whenever you're ready, the answer is yes, this ring is waiting. I took the box, looking at the ring that represented everything he felt, everything he wanted. You're sure? Because Declan, once we do this, once we make it official, there's no going back. I'm not the kind of woman who walks away from marriage. I'm counting on that. His smile was warm, despite the bruises still visible on his face. Elena, I've spent my life building power and influence, but none of it matters if I can't share it with you. So yes, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. I slipped the ring on my finger, watching it catch the light. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for me. which, knowing Declan's attention to detail, it probably had been. Yes, I said simply. The answer is yes. His kiss was gentle, mindful of his injuries, but full of promise. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Thank God. I've been carrying that ring around for 3 days, terrified you'd say it was too soon. It probably is too soon, I admitted. By normal standards. But nothing about us has ever been normal. We've spent 6 years building toward this. That's not too soon. That's just finally getting here. We drove home in comfortable silence, my hand in his, the ring on my finger feeling both surreal and absolutely right. Tomorrow, we'd tell his mother and sister. Eventually, we'd tell my family, though I suspected my mother would have conflicting feelings about my marrying someone like Declan. But tonight was just us. The man I'd loved from careful distance, and the future we were finally brave enough to reach for. As we pulled into his driveway, Declan's phone rang. He glanced at it, expression darkening. It's Marco. Probably about the Moretti situation. He answered, listening intently. When? Where? How many? He was quiet for a moment. Understood. Triple security at the house. Elena stays here under Lachlan's watch. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He ended the call and turned to me. Roberto made his move. He's hitting one of my warehouses. Not the illegal operations, but a legitimate storage facility. It's bait. He wants me to respond. And you have to. Yes. He cupped my face. Elena, I need you to stay here. Lachlan and the others will keep you safe. But I have to handle this. If I don't respond to Roberto's provocation, it signals weakness. Other rivals will start testing boundaries. I understand. And I did, though fear coiled in my chest. Just come back. Always. He kissed me hard, then softer. I love you. Never doubt that. I love you too. Be careful. I watched him drive away, then went inside where Lachlan had already positioned additional guards. The waiting was terrible. Minutes stretched into hours. I tried to read, to watch television, to do anything but imagine worst-case scenarios. At midnight, Lachlan's phone rang. He listened, his expression carefully neutral, then turned to me. There's been a development. Mr. Sullivan needs you at the warehouse. He's unharmed. He added quickly, but he specifically requested your presence. We drove through empty streets to an industrial area I'd never visited. The warehouse was surrounded by police cars and fire trucks, lights flashing against the night sky. Smoke rose from one section of the building, but the fire appeared contained. Lachlan led me past police officers who nodded respectfully to where Declan stood talking with a fire captain. He turned when he saw me, pulling me against him despite an audience of first responders and police. "You're all right?" I asked, searching his face. "I'm fine." Roberto started the fire remotely, then called to tell me he'd be targeting my properties until I agreed to cede territory. He gestured to the warehouse. 50 million in inventory, most of it legitimately owned. He wanted to make a point. And did he? Yes. Declan's expression was grim. The point that I can't let this continue, that it's time to end this decisively. What does that mean? He looked down at me, and I saw resolution in his eyes. It means I'm calling a meeting of the families, all of them. We're going to settle the boundaries once and for all, with witnesses and agreements that can't be broken without facing everyone else's retaliation. Will that work? It should. Roberto is young and reckless, but even he won't defy a collective agreement. And if he does... Declan's voice hardened. Then he'll face consequences from people who won't show the restraint I have. It was nearly dawn when we finally returned home. Exhausted, covered in soot from the warehouse, but alive and together. We showered separately, then collapsed into bed, holding each other in the dark. "This is what our life will look like," Declan said quietly. "Late nights, interrupted plans, constant vigilance. Are you still sure?" I thought about the ring on my finger, about 6 years of loving this man from distance, about the future stretching before us. Complicated, dangerous, but undeniably ours. "I'm sure," I whispered. "Whatever comes, Declan, we'll face it together." His arms tightened around me. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." 3 weeks later, the meeting of families took place. Declan presented his case, backed by witnesses and documentation of Roberto's attacks. The collective decision was swift. Roberto would honor the existing boundaries or face sanctions from all the families. He agreed, sullenly, but agreed. The crisis passed. Life settled into a new normal. We set a wedding date, small ceremony, just family and close friends. My parents adjusted to the reality that I was marrying Declan Sullivan, their concern gradually easing as they saw how he treated me. The day I walked down the aisle toward him, I thought about the dress I'd tried on in his office bathroom. The question I'd asked that had changed everything. "Does it look good?" And his answer, the 4 words that had unraveled years of careful distance. "Don't marry him." Now, in the white dress I'd chosen for myself, walking toward the man I'd chosen for myself, I understood what he'd seen that day. Not just a woman in a wedding dress, but a woman about to make the wrong choice, about to sacrifice herself for the wrong reasons. He'd given me the courage to reach for what I really wanted. And now, as he took my hands at the altar, as we made promises that legally bound us together, I knew I'd made the right choice. "I love you," he whispered, as we were pronounced husband and wife. "I love you too," I replied. "Always." Our first dance was to a song we'd discovered during one of our late nights working. Something slow and romantic that we'd hummed while filing reports. His mother cried. My mother smiled despite her reservations. And Declan held me close, the man I'd loved from careful distance, now mine in every way that mattered. "No regrets?" he asked as we swayed together. "Not one." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "You?" Only that I waited so long to say something. His smile was warm. "But we're here now. That's what matters." "We're here now," I agreed. And as the song ended, as he kissed me with witnesses cheering around us, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. 6 years of denial and want. A wedding dress that had started everything. 4 words that had changed my life. Don't marry him. The best advice I'd ever received. The catalyst that had finally given me the courage to reach for what I wanted. And now, standing in Declan's arms as his wife, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. Did you like the story? Then hit that like button now. Comment below what you thought. I read them all, and share it with that friend who loves a good story. Here at Emma Romance Library, there's a new story every day. Don't miss it. See you soon.